And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. And I say welcome back because I know that you were just listening to one of our other episodes and you wanted more. So you came back for another taste, another bite, another awesome episode of this podcast that we are all putting together. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. This is the podcast that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters. And you guessed it, it's done by podcasters. And my guest today is a podcaster. All right, guys, let's dive right into this thing. I want to thank everybody for all of the support, all the following. If you are out there and you have a podcast and I have not interviewed you yet, make sure that you are contacting me. Jump into our free Podcaster Nation group. It's on Facebook and it's the Podcaster Nation. Just look that up on Facebook. Boom. There's a link in the show notes. If you have a podcast and you haven't talked to me yet, what are you waiting for? Come on, get in here, join the community. Let's get the word out. All right. That's what we do. That's how we help each other. I've got an awesome dude on with me today. All right. This guy has two podcasts. He has one that's called Uncharted, Navigating Faith and Life. He's got a second one that's called Walking Through the Bible, a Year-Long Journey. Please welcome to the podcast, husband, dad, youth and children's pastor, Adam Swedenburg. Adam, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm hanging in, man. You know what? I'm living large. I'm loving every part of this right now. But thank you for joining me today, man. I really appreciate you jumping on so quick. I mean, I think I just talked to you for the first time yesterday, didn't I?
Yeah, that's right. We linked up on Facebook and yeah, yesterday. Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
quick.
You
Thank you
didn't,
for having me here.
not at all. You didn't waste any time, man. You were like, up, I'm on this. Bang. So I love that positive, quick, fast action. All right. Adam, you've got two podcasts. You're a pastor. Obviously, a lot of this is, Christ related, so on and so forth. I can't wait to hear about both of them. Before we get into the actual podcast, though, I mean, tell us all a little bit about you. You know what I mean? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Go for it, brother.
Yeah, so my name's Adam. We already covered that, but my original name was Adam Kuntz. I was at the age of 3 put into foster care, me and my siblings, because of the home that we were being raised into wasn't the best of homes. There was drug usage being used in the house. There was some other things going on in the house that wasn't kid friendly, and just a lot of things, a lot of negativity. I know horror stories where my brother was, you know, put in a closet for some couple hours on top, or my siblings were done things, or things happened to them that shouldn't have ever happened to children. So anyway, finally all my siblings had had enough of it, and one of my older siblings went to school one day and reported it to the teacher, and thankfully the teacher did care about what all was going on. And I I guess you could say, if you have any knowledge of like how that type stuff works, the DHR usually has to look into it and do a home study, but not in our case. Our case was kind of on the more severe side, that as soon as my sister reported it all, like none of them ever went home that day that she reported it. They stayed after school, and they came and picked me up, and that was the story of us getting taken out of that home and put into foster care. But the reason I say all that is because that's kind of what transitioned my heart to loving children and youth, because my dad was always a youth pastor all my life. He fostered us, then he adopted us. And we were fostered and adopted through Alabama Baptist Children Home in Alabama. And so we grew up through that organization. I was 3, my brother was 6. So I was very young. Dad was all I knew. And so watching him, going to church with him, um, seeing how he loved us, seeing how he loved other children and youth, it just grew a passion in me for the same thing. And so that's kind of what started my heart on fire for youth and children's ministry, and the reason that I feel like I want to help those that are also lost and also may have struggles going on in their life. And so that led me to youth ministry, but also at the same time, I have a heart for those in need. So I'm also a volunteer firefighter, have been for 10 years, and I'm also an EMT and have been an EMT for probably 13 years, and I work in the emergency department as well. So I have a lot of things going on, and it all boils down to my background of wanting to help people. So.
Wow. Wow. I mean, yeah, I didn't know that was coming. I, I really didn't. We always have a pre-interview and we talk for a second, but wow, man. First, let me just say I'm so sorry you had to deal with stuff like that. And I really am. I know I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of work with youth. I've been, coaching youth for a very long time. Um, and now, of course, I mostly coach grown-ups, but I ran into so many kids who had issues like you were dealing with and, weren't getting the help that they needed to get. And, too often I ended up having to be the help, to be the one who stood up and notified people and so on. But I mean, for your sister to be the one to blow the whistle. I mean, how old was she when she did that?
She was should be around 8 or 9 when
So
she did
she
that.
was,
So
no, was she your older sister? Were you younger than that?
yes, I'm the youngest out of the four, so she's the oldest.
I mean, at that age, for her to step up and say, "Hey, myself and my family are not being treated well," I mean, that's tough. That's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah, because I'm sure there was thoughts in her mind of like, what if the teacher didn't believe her, or what if the teacher,
Right.
talked to the parents and things only gotten worse at home? Like, I'm sure there was 1,000 things running through her head.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When you were a child, when you were going through that stuff, did you have a relationship with God back then? Or is that something that's fostered in you since you got out of that horrible situation?
So that's actually a great question, and because like until I was probably mid teenager, I I hated God. To be quite frank, I hated God because I said, if there was a God, why would he allow the things that happened to me or my siblings or Cedric to go on? And it's kind of interesting because we even our adoption date was supposed to be 9/11/2001. So, I mean, even that,
Oh man.
yeah, the date sounds familiar, right? So,
Oh yeah.
even our adoption date had something, horrible happen. So, all that time frame in my life was just like, man, if God's real, he must hate me. And so it was kind of mutual. God hated me, and if there was a God, I hated him.
Right.
So
Right. That's not an unnatural reaction for a young man who's going through stuff you're going through. I'm sure you've found that also since then.
yes, for sure. So going through that and being able to use that now in my ministry of other students having questions or doubts about God, it really helps.
So, was it just a gradual thing, or was there an event? Some sort of cataclysmic thing that happened. An aha moment where maybe an awakening where you realized that you wanted to follow this path and become a pastor and spread the word like that.
So I always kind of felt like I wanted to do something in ministry, but also at the same time, I was running away from that because I did not want it. So that's kind of what led me to be a firefighter and a EMT, was that's what I was wanting. But I still had this struggle of wanting to do something else. But also, like in high school, you wouldn't have wanted to be around me. I was somebody you didn't probably want to be around. I was back then I had anger and you could look at me wrong and you'd be in a trash can, or I was behind my dad's back smoking weed, and so doing drugs, having anger. I wasn't the type of person that most people would want to be around back in my high school days. And so then like that was leading me to trouble. I have some friends that are either dead or in jail, and I was like, whew, I don't want to end up like them. So that was opening my eyes. And at the same time, because of who my dad was, a youth pastor, I was getting dragged to church because you have to remember I hated God at this point. But I
Right. Right.
kept getting dragged to church. And I noticed something different about like church people. Like they could have like a loss of a dad or mom, or they could have something tragedy happen, and like, yeah, they'd be upset, but like come like Wednesday or next Sunday, like they would seem happy again. And I was like, why do these people always seem to find happiness? Like, what is it about these people?
Yeah.
And so I started listening more in church and started paying attention to those people. And when I started also realizing that my friends and were dying or going to jail because of the things we were doing back then, I started to realize something in my life needed to change.
Okay. So how old were you when you kind of had the calling to say, all right, it's time for me to, get into this and take it to the next level?
I would say it was when I was age 15. We were living in Tuscaloosa, and I can remember it was at Curls Creek Baptist Church is when I decided to give my life to God.
Nice. Nice. And you've been doing that ever since then.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
still
how
kind of still kind of ran away from the calling. But a funny note here is I was actually in nursing school, and I was listening to the professor, and just something hit me like a lightning bolt. I don't know. I packed up my bags, packed up my laptop, packed up my books while the professor was speaking. And I don't encourage anyone to do this, but while the professor was speaking, I just silently saw my way out of the room, dropped out of the school that day, had a full ride scholarship, forgot to talk with them people first, but thankfully I talked to them after dropping out of the school, and they were like, okay, you should have talked to us first. But the next day I was literally enrolled at Liberty University pursuing my bachelor's in next gen ministry.
wow. That's a calling right there, where you just get up and you walk out and you drop everything and that's your new direction. Holy cow, man. Holy cow. All right. All right. So let me ask you this then. That's how you get into it. That's how you end up on that path. It's worth noting that, all these other jobs, the firefighter, the EMT, even nursing is all still helping people. So clearly you've got a servant mentality, and a need there to serve. So any of those are great callings, and especially serving God, and being in that capacity. So I applaud you for all of it. Um, you do have a couple of podcasts that you do. Now, do you do those just on your own, or do you do those in association with the church that you're with, or what's the dynamic there?
So it's kind of funny. The thought that hit me to do podcast, which now I fell in love with it and I do it more. But the original thought that drove me to podcasting was my first podcast show, Uncharted Navigating Faith and Life. And the reason I had the idea and the reason that it started is because I have youth on Sunday and I have youth on Wednesday. And because of football games or soccer games or band or whatever, not all those youth are always able to make it to every meeting, every worship service. So the idea hit me, hey, why don't I do a podcast where I take an hour lesson and turn it into like a 10-minute short lesson? That way, if any of my students missed worship on, say, Wednesday night, they could jump on there Thursday morning and have a short, straight to the line lesson of what we talked about last night when they missed it due to whatever.
Nice. So you use that podcast to get the word out on whatever the lesson was that you're teaching, in the brick and mortar, church itself.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it's an educational podcast in that capacity. So gotcha. Gotcha. Now, Uncharted was the first one that you put out.
Yes, it was the idea behind everything. And then I started putting out a couple episodes of it. And then I realized, hey, I really love this podcasting thing. I'm actually going to spend more time doing this. 'Cause originally, like I said, just started as something kind of fun. But now it's actually became like a diehard hobby. And that I was like, man, I really like this. And so I started the second podcast, and it started because I was like, man, what if the youth had a way to cover the entire Bible in a year and me explain like chapter to chapter what these verses mean. And so that's kind of what started the second one, is just me falling in love with podcasting.
Wow. And you haven't been doing it very long. I mean, you're a fairly new, entrant into the world of podcasting, man. I mean, tell everybody when you got started.
I started right before Christmas, so in sometime in November. I think it was right before Thanksgiving because I think on Uncharted, I remember like Thanksgiving episode being like my number two or three episode. So
Nice. So you've been doing it a little over 3 months, sounds like.
yes.
Beautiful. And I know you got around 20 episodes, give or take, between the two podcasts that we talked about. Um, First of all, congratulations on all that.
Thanks.
I said it to you at the preamp, but I want to make sure I'm telling you now on the air. Congratulations. I love when people find podcasting, and I can tell just in the short time we've been talking to each other how much you enjoy it and how much you really like it. We need people like that. The world of podcasting needs podcasters who love what they're doing. It raises all the ships. It makes everything worth it, and the content's better. The intention is there. The craft ends up being the thing that gets put out front. What you're doing. So Uncharted then um, is Uncharted exclusively the lesson that you teach to the youth group then? And how do you come up with those lessons? Are they, dictated through some other kind of curriculum, or do you make that up as you go, or, how does that work?
So originally the Uncharted podcast is that's how it started. It's kind of veered off from being an exact copy of the Wednesday night lesson. We've had some other topics here lately that we've had to discuss. So I've been kind of doing some fill-in podcast episodes that haven't been related to Wednesday nights because we've been needing to do some other topics. But I create all my curriculum for my use. So my Sunday school lessons, I'm hand doing those. My Wednesday lessons, I'm hand doing those. My podcast episodes, I'm hand doing those. So uh when I first got into youth ministry, of course, curriculum was great, but now I've started to enjoy the freedom and the fun of creating my own materials.
Nice. Because I listened to both the podcasts and, I got to kind of check out pieces of different episodes and stuff like that because, I want to know what I'm getting into when I come to talk to you on this show. If I haven't heard your stuff, then I'm just flying blind, and that doesn't help anybody. So, yeah, and it didn't sound like every single episode was necessarily a lesson. Give everybody an example of a non-lesson, like a topic or something that you cover and in one of your episodes.
Yeah, so the newest one was just how to love. And in that episode, Uncharted, Navigating Life and Faith in Life, it's meant to be a really real life application of taking the Bible and applying it to real life. And one of the most recent lessons or topics that we covered was love. And how does that look? What is Christian love versus world love? And how can we take Christian love out to our workplaces, our schools, and how can we love everyone? And what does it mean to love everyone? And how does that look? So just applying the Bible to real life application.
Nice, very nice. I'm pretty sure I heard part of that one because when you said that, I was like, oh yeah. So, let me talk about the second one for a minute. I've seen some things online where people are like, oh, hey, cover the Bible in a year, blah, blah, blah. Now, for you, are you going front to back with the Bible, or are you picking and choosing where you go? Are you following a particular path through the Bible, in terms of what you cover and when on your second podcast, the Walking Through the Bible, a year-long journey?
You're correct. There is a lot of reading plans online, but one thing I've kind of, me personally, and I could be totally wrong, but me personally, I've noticed that a lot of reading plans that are pre-made have a lot of jumping around in the Bible. You might do Genesis, then you might read a verse from Ecclesiastes, then you might read a verse from Revelation, and it's very jumpy. And so that's another reason why I wanted to start walking through the Bible a year-long journey is because I literally started with verse one of Genesis, and I'm going all the way from Genesis to all the way to Revelation in order. So from front cover to back cover.
Nice. That's something I haven't heard, to be honest. And I've always wondered why people didn't just do that because I've read the Bible, myself. I've read it cover to cover. I don't regret a minute of that. But I hadn't heard all this new wave, pick and choose, go read a little Matthew, a little bit of, Paul, go read some, Philippines. I mean, it was like I just started, with Genesis in the beginning and
Right.
and it took me right through. Um, and I think, um, I thought when I was going through it that way for myself that it made sense. If I'm reading the book of Matthew, then I'm reading the book of Matthew. It's like if you're watching a movie or a series. If you're watching some series on Netflix and there's 8 episodes, I don't want to watch 2 episodes of this and then go turn to a different show and then watch 2 episodes of that and then come back and watch another episode of the first show. I want to watch the show. you know,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, did any of that go into your thinking in terms of that, or what was it that made you ultimately decide I'm just going to start at page one until I'm done?
Yeah, you kind of nailed it on the head. Like I said, those reading plans just they jump around, and like you said, you did a great job of saying it. It's like you don't want to watch a TV show and watch the first step, the pilot show, and then jump like to season three and watch the middle of that show. Like you would be totally lost. What happened to the first two episodes? And same with the Bible. You don't want to start in Genesis where God creates everything and then read like the Matthew, Mark, and Luke where like Jesus is like in the middle of his life. Like, wait, hold on. What happened before all that? We went from everything was created to now we're like Jesus is here on earth and in the middle of his life, you know? So
Right.
you
Yeah.
nailed it on the head with your analogy there of watching TV.
So then on your Walking Through the Bible podcast, you read the passage and discuss it both?
That's right. Yeah. So I read it, which for podcast sake, because I don't want episodes to be entirely too long. I think my last episode was 19 minutes long. Um, but I covered three chapters, and to be able to do that in a podcast, I do have to jump around a little bit. So I read like the verses that really mean something to me, and then I talk about it. But then I talk about the verses that I read, and then I talk about like a glimpse of that chapter itself before moving on to the next chapter. And then I do the same thing. But also, right before I start reading chapter, I always tell my listeners, hey, this is what we're going to read today. Grab your Bible, try to listen with me, but also on your own, go back and try to read these three chapters on your entirety that I didn't get to read fully.
Right.
So.
Right. 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 Yeah, I noticed that too. When I was listening to it, because I remember hearing you say almost that exact thing. Um, yeah, so it is kind of you're working through it. If you're the listener, you're working through it. You're hearing your highlights. You're getting your interpretation in some cases, your call outs on what's important. But then there is a little bit of responsibility for you, the listener, to then read the rest of the material that's not covered.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
gotcha,
There is a little bit of homework with that podcast, I guess you
gotcha,
could say.
gotcha. So I know that you wanted to like with Uncharted. I know that you wanted to find a way to give the lessons to the kids that missed the class. Um, and with walking through the Bible, that sounds like it's more about educating people. What's the I guess what's the goal? What's the mission? To both podcasts are different. So what are you trying to accomplish with each of these podcasts?
So the first one, Uncharted, Navigating Faith and Life, it's kind of more your advanced, would if you would say more advanced teaching of the Bible because you we're not going by verse. We're not like explaining what the verse means, but we're taking the verse and applying it to how you can actually live it into your life. So that one's a little bit more in depth. And whereas like walking through the Bible is more like your beginners like into the Bible. Like this is verse by verse, telling you what it means, why it's there, and just applying it to just knowledge. If so, The ultimate goal for both of them is to just be able to teach everybody about the Bible, teach everybody how we as Christians should be able to walk and live and talk. And so if you so both actually go hand in hand. I would actually recommend if anybody's listening to one of them to be listening to both of them, because one teaches you how to apply it to your life, but the other one teaches you like what the actual scriptures mean.
Nice, nice. And so, how does the church feel about you doing this?
They love it. They know why I'm doing it. It's on board of like our goal as a church. And not only that, but it also gives one of the cool benefits that was in hindsight of the podcast, that I didn't think about. But the Uncharted also gives parents a insight of what their youth are learning now. So I've even got parents on board of listening, because now they're using that at home as a teaching tool to be like, okay, I listened to what y'all are learning about. Let's talk about it as a family. So that was a cool thing that came out of that one that was in hindsight. So it's pretty cool, everything that's been going on with that one, and also walking through the Bible. So
Nice, nice. Now, I know I understand that the goal, for all this obviously is education. It's spreading the information. It's exposure. To these things. Um, was there a particular reason why you chose the Walking Through the Bible as your second podcast?
So I was actually debating two different podcasts, and I was debating either starting one, and I may start it later on, not right now, but I was debating on starting one for like families, because like I'm a dad now. I was like, maybe it would be cool if I started one for families, and just encouragement as a new family or whatever, and just a Christian podcast for families. So that thought was going through my head, and then I also had the other thought of walking through the Bible one, and I was like, I'm gonna stay close to my core of who I am, and my core of who I am is teaching people, and especially youth and children. So I was like, let me do the Bible one, because that one's more geared to who I have a heart of teaching, which is children and youth, versus the family one. So that's why between those two, I chose the Bible one.
Nice. Nice. Hey, if you're going to do a third podcast, brother, go for it. Just a little bit of advice. Get to 20 episodes on the other two before you start the third one.
Yeah.
Just 20 episodes of a podcast is in my mind, and I coach people on podcasting all the time. This is one of my things that I'm fairly solid on. When you get to 20 episodes of one particular podcast, you have a real good idea at that point of how much you enjoy doing it, where you're going with it. Can you see the vision for it in the future at episodes 40, 50, and beyond? If you get to 20 and you're like, I think I've said everything I need to say, and I don't really have a passion for this one anymore, well, then maybe it's time to hang that one up and do a different one or do something else. But you're well on your way, and I can tell that you're passionate about both of these. So before you start that third one, though, get to 20
Oh yeah. Yeah.
on
It'll
each
be a
one.
while.
All right.
It'll be
No,
a
no.
while.
And these come out weekly, is that right?
So the Uncharted, it comes out every Thursday morning at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And the Walking Through the Bible year-long journey, it comes out every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So that one
Okay.
has two episodes per week.
Got it. So then walk through the Bibles twice a week. Cool. Very, very cool. All right, we talked about that. We talked about that. All right, let me ask you a little bit about the mechanics of podcasting, because hey, we our audience is podcasters. So, as someone who just started, you and I talked briefly in our pre-interview, and I didn't even get a chance to ask you yet, and you told me a pretty quick story about you getting started with equipment. Share that with everybody.
Yeah, so I was getting into podcasting, and I was like, oh, I need some equipment. So my brother-in-law gifted me some equipment, and I don't know. if it's just the equipment might be faultier, or if it's just the I don't know, but or what's going on, but or if it's just not great for my computer that I'm using. So anyway, I was using it. It had a little sound mixer and a mic and everything, and I was noticing when I was going into my editing and when I was publishing it that the audio just was not that great. It was not worthy of podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was like, so I tried something different. I just went straight into my laptop. I took the mixer out, I took the mic off, I took all that out, and I just straight went to talking straight into my laptop, went into it, and then went into the editing studio, and it sounded incredible. And so that's how I've been rocking and rolling here lately. Is just talking straight into the computer.
I love that. I really do. I love that. So many people try to complicate this process, and I just wanted people to hear a real, authentic story. I mean, they gave you some equipment, which was great. I mean, thanks for the blessing. Wonderful, but you didn't even need that. People don't understand when I say, look, you don't have to spend any money to start a podcast. Use your phone. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. People are like, no, 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 I got to have the setup and the hookup and the this and the $5,000 mixing board. No, you don't. not to have not to have a conversation and record it. Okay, no, you don't. So you found that out early, which is great. I love that. Um, Now, as you were getting into it, I know it's early, but I know you also were thinking a little bit about monetizing. And did you have some questions on that, or were you thinking about what to do? What's been your thought on how to monetize this, given your subject matter and how it relates to the church and everything else?
Yeah, so I've been playing around with that this week and last week, just trying to find avenues of how that looks like and how I could go about doing that. I recently took my podcast away from Spotify and went into Buzzsprout because it gives you an option to support the show on every podcast wherever whatever platform you're in. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that. And then I've been looking at some other things and doing some research, and I uh I don't know. I kind of lost, don't really know where to start, but I did randomly send out some Christian, I'm not going to say any of them just in case the names of any just in case they come back and say sorry, but I did randomly just send out some emails this morning to some Christian companies and was like, "Hey, look, my name's Adam. I'm a children and youth pastor and I have a Christian podcast. Would you be interested in doing some type of sponsorship program?" So,
Nice,
I don't know.
nice. You went
Starting
right.
from the book. So
That's beautiful, though. I mean, it's a little early on the monetization, but I mean, honestly, if you can get it, get it. But I love the fact that you just took it by the reins and went right into sales. You know what I mean? So many people are like, oh, I got to find advertisers and I got to go through the system and, you know, I got to have X number of downloads. You were just like, I'm going to my public. I'm going to go sell. And that's huge to take action like that, man. Congrats on that. That's awesome.
thank you. Thank
I
you.
mean, even if you don't get anybody, just the fact that you went out and put yourself out there like that, I'm very impressed. Way to go.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Keep me posted on that, man. If you get someone to sign up as a sponsor or something, just send me a DM just because I want to hear about it. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm
Yeah.
rooting for
For
you.
sure.
That's beautiful. I love that. Um, the there's two more questions that I have about podcasting and stuff that I want to make sure we cover. I want to thank you ahead of time just for coming on the show and talking about this stuff. In the world that we live in today, talking about faith and the Bible and everything else has almost become a revolutionary act. So I appreciate someone who's, that devout and has that kind of a mission and is trying to spread it. So power to you for that.
Thank you. Yes.
But now you have, there's two questions that I always ask everybody towards, the end of the podcast. And the first one's my corny question. All right. And I keep asking it because I get really great answers to it. Um, what is it you love the most about podcasting? Okay. Either of your podcasts, doesn't matter. And what is it that you hate or that you like the least or that you really can't stand about podcasting?
So I guess with me being brand new, so my number one that I really love about it is I really made some great connections already with it. Just different communities on Facebook, different communities on the internet, just learning about it. I'm a person that loves learning. Like if I could go to school every single day and it not be expensive, I would be in school every day because I love learning. Like, so learning this and learning things about it has been fascinating. And then just meeting all the people that I know I'm early in it, so I haven't met that many, but just meeting people like you, meeting other people, connecting with people, it's been a real fun part of it.
That's really cool.
And and I guess the second thing, right now, it could change. It could very easily change, but I think it's partially because I'm new to the game. But the number two thing that I kind of hate right now is that I'm kind of feeling lost on how to, I guess, get audience, build it up. I'm trying TikTok, I'm
Ah,
trying Instagram and Facebook, trying just doing reels on Facebook, just trying to get people to notice me. That way it leads hopefully to them to finding my podcast. So I don't know. That's been my number one least favorite thing is the challenge of how do you get an audience.
yeah,
So
right. Hey, that's something everybody has to deal with when they're new and when they're young in the process. So do not feel like, you're alone out there. Okay. Everybody starts that way where they're like, oh, how is this going to happen? I got, two people listening to my show. What am I doing? Um, but I love that. I mean, if that's the thing you hate the most, you're going to be doing just fine in the podcasting world. Okay, brother. So hang in there. Hang in there. Um, let me ask you this too. The you haven't been in it for a long time, but part of podcasting is learning. It's learning as you go, and especially when you're new. I always ask everybody for a piece of advice to give to other podcasters. Maybe something they've encountered, something they've come across. And yeah, you're new, so you don't know as much as somebody who's got 200 episodes, But by the same token, I know you've come across at least a couple things where you've learned from it. You've said, "Hey, I should have done that," or maybe this is working. What's one little piece of advice that you would give to someone who, maybe wants to start a podcast or someone who's in the business right now that you've learned?
I've learned that, you know, it's important to spend a little bit money on the podcast. You know, you as much as you maybe not want to because I've been kind of hesitant myself because I'm just starting, I'm brand new, I don't know if it's going to take off, I don't know if I'm going to get much of an audience, all those things that are ifs have kind of made me a little bit resilient to not spend money. But at the same time, I've learned that there are reasons in the podcasting network that I should spend money. I've heard some horror stories where people didn't use paid programs to do their podcast and then they jumped on those platforms the next day and they no longer had their shows or episodes. So I was like, let me not be one of those subjects.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's an advantage to paying Buzzsprout for it. Is you're pretty sure you're going to have the podcast tomorrow when you log in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, that's good stuff, man. It is. Everybody should be investing a little bit of money in it, but when you do that, and depending on your mission and your setup, of course, that can all be difficult. But it sounds like you really got things going on the right track. Is there, anything that we haven't covered today? Anything that you're offering or that you're doing or events or anything coming up or maybe episodes that you have planned? Anything you want to tell everybody about before we wrap things up, man?
Oh, just if you if you don't mind, jump on there, listen to some of the episodes. If that's something you like, just grab it and hopefully share it. Like I said, I'm just trying to build up the audience, brand new, so I don't have any events or anything going on or merchandise yet. But hey, maybe I will in the future. But
Right on, right on. Well, when we get off, I am going to send you a link though to the group. It's our free podcasting group, The Podcaster Nation. I hope you'll check that out. You can post your episodes in there. We're all podcasters, so we're all in there trying to help each other, trying to kind of like each other's shows and give each other reviews and maybe take a listen to something we haven't heard before. It's a great group. It really is, and it's young and it's small because we just started the group itself. But I think you'll have a really good time in there. So I'm going to send that to you. I hope you'll take a look at it.
Yeah, that'd be great because I'd love anybody's feedback on I'm brand new, so anybody's feedback would be great.
Right on. Right on. Okay. Adam, listen, I want to thank you for coming on. Our timing is perfect. I mean, it's like the perfect time on the podcast. So you covered everything. You covered it beautifully. I think everybody understands your mission. And, I hope everybody goes and takes a listen to these two podcasts. One more time, they're Uncharted, Navigating Faith and Life, and Walking Through the Bible, a year-long journey, all by Adam Swedenburg. Um, Adam, thank you so much for coming on today, brother, and for being transparent, telling your story, and for just being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much again for allowing me to be here. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, you too. Pleasure to meet you, man. We're gonna be talking again. I'm sure of it. All right, folks, that has been another awesome episode of the Podcaster Nation. It's the podcast that's about podcasters. It's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. Folks, the sky is the limit when it comes to podcasting, and it doesn't matter if you have 20 episodes. It doesn't matter if you have 20,000 episodes. Being here, being authentic, being real, putting your heart, putting your soul into your show, putting time into your craft. These are all things that are lost arts and that we need to just make sure we're doing. Be genuine, be authentic, be who you are. People are they're gonna find you. They're gonna come to you. If you build it, they will come. This is the podcast where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing. Until next time.